Secret Cipher by Whitaker Ringwald, Chapter 17. Fact. A wormhole and a portal are two totally different things. A wormhole is a shortcut through space-time, like a tunnel or a bridge, with each end residing in a different place. A portal is a gate or doorway that opens into a particular place. I know that because it was drilled into my head by my brother one night last year when our family was playing a board game version of Jeopardy! Unlike Jack's, my eyes had been wide open when the girl reappeared, but I had no idea if she'd used a wormhole, portal, or some kind of transportation device like they use in Star Trek. I did know, however, that those things were based on scientific principles, so they were a bit easier to accept than the magical urns. "She looks different," Jax whispered. She did. Her red hair was unbraided, hanging in crumpled waves. She wore a short dress that had a woven pattern along the collar and hem, but she had the same sandals that wound up to her knees. With her bag slung over her shoulder, she waded across the fountain. Tyler rushed over and helped her out. "I am pleased that you are still here," she told him with a smile. "I brought you a gift." As she opened her bag, my mood instantly changed from amazement to fear, as if a cobra might pop out, or a deadly urn. But she didn't pull out an urn. She pulled out a small glass vial filled with green liquid. She offered it to Tyler. "Drink." I held up my hand. "I wouldn't drink that if I were you." My brother had a tendency to shove anything that looked edible into his mouth. "I can't think of a single thing we drink that is naturally green, except for the wheatgrass juice my mom makes. Green is the color most often used in movies to represent things that are poisonous and or radioactive. Mouthwash is green, and so is engine coolant. If you drink that first, you'll die. If you drink the first, you'll get sick. If you drink the second, you'll die." "Why is it bubbling?" Jax asked. Like one of my father's lab experiments, the liquid frothed inside the glass vial, strengthening my belief that it was deadly. The girl put a hand over her heart as if we'd stabbed her. "You do not trust me?" We don't know you," I stammered. "Look, we're very confused," Jack said. "You steal the urn, you disappear, you reappear. We don't know what's going on. You have a lot of explaining to do before one of us drinks that green stuff. Like, where did you go? And how did you get there?" "I traveled to my world and presented the urn of hope to Zeus." "Zeus?" Tyler looked like he might wet his pants. "The Zeus? Is there another Zeus? Zeus is alive?" Tyler started to breathe really fast. We'd need to find a paper bag if he hyperventilated. But why was I worrying about Tyler? What about my reaction? I felt dizzy all of a sudden. What about, I'd just gotten off a roller coaster. I needed to sit down. I needed to go home and read something that made sense. The world's longest fingernails made sense. The world's largest baby made sense. Zeus being alive did not. A grin spread across Tyler's face. "This is so cool," he said. "You went to see Zeus, the main man, the king of the gods?" "Yes, through the Poseidon portal." "Poseidon is a portal?" Tyler's voice cracked. I'd never seen him so happy. He was acting as if Christmas had come in the middle of July. "Wait a minute." Jax folded her arms across her chest. "What's a portal?" "A gate or doorway that opens into a particular place," Tyler and I both replied at the same time. The girl nodded. "It is a temporary means of travel, but I don't understand why your sculptors and painters would portray Poseidon with a beard." She turned toward the reclining statue. "Why would a god who spends most of his life in the sea possess facial hair? Or any hair for that matter?" "Poseidon is bald?" Tyler asked. "Wow! I have to tell Walker to make changes in the game." "How do we know the urn's with Zeus?" Jax asked. "I mean, maybe it's still in your bag." The girl turned the leather bag upside down and shook it. Nothing fell out. "The urn of hope will remain under Zeus's protection. Once I have delivered all three urns, Zeus will throw them into Hephaestus's fire. Since they are forged together, they must be neutralized together." "Hephaestus is the blacksmith to the gods," Tyler explained to us. "I know, Jack said. I've been reading that book, remember? The girl held out the vial of green liquid. I had forgotten all about it. Now that I have answered some of your questions, will you please drink this? It will relieve your pain. Pain? I hadn't noticed Tyler limping or complaining about a headache. I don't know what you're talking about, he said with a shrug. I don't have any pain. She moved very close to him. They were the same height, so their eyes were at the exact same level. As she stared deeply, he didn't blink. The urn has not completely left you. There is still sadness. I see it. I saw it when we first met. You're wrong, Jack said. He's feeling fine. He told us, right, Tyler? She pressed the vial into his hand. The gods have sent you this elixir to remove the urn's ill effects. You will not remember the pain you suffered. You will be free of the lingering darkness. Tyler's eyes widened. Give me that! He grabbed the vial and pulled out the little cork. Wait! Both Jax and I cried. But the green liquid disappeared in one gulp. I immediately thought about the drug commercials that listed all the side effects. The list might begin with the common things like headaches, dizziness, or sleepiness, but then it gets worse, like difficulty breathing, internal bleeding, and sudden death. Sudden death is not a side effect. You can't recover. After swallowing, Tyler wiped his hand over his mouth and stared into space. Jax and I watched, neither of us saying a word. My finger was poised over the phone, ready to dial 911 at the first sign of trouble. Tyler's lips turning blue, his eyes bugging out, his head spinning around. The liquid had been bubbling. Surely it wouldn't go down without some sort of side effect. The girl stepped back. How do you feel? She asked gently. Better, he said after a deep, satisfied sigh. Way better. Your eyes are clearing, she told him. What are you talking about? Jack stood on tiptoe and looked into Tyler's eyes. They looked the same to me, I agreed. Tyler sighed again. It's gone. It's really gone. He smiled with amazement, as if he'd been cured of cancer. There's no darkness. I feel great. What do you mean there's no darkness? I asked. Tyler hesitated a moment. I didn't want Mom or Dad to know I was still feeling cruddy, so I pretended I was fine. If they knew, they would have sent me back to the hospital. But now you feel good? What was in that? I asked. I took the vial from Tyler's hand and sniffed it. There was no odor. If I take it to Dad's lab, he'd be able to break down the elements. That would be a waste of time. The girl took the vial and tucked it into her bag. Tyler is cured by the gods. That is all you need to know. Cured, Tyler repeated. He smiled. I feel better than ever. Wow, Jack said. That's amazing. Then she laughed. Do the gods have something that won't cure Tyler's BO? Very funny, Tyler said, his smile fading. He turned away and sniffed under his arm. The girl slung her bag onto her other shoulder. Time moves much more quickly in your world, so we must make haste. We? Jax asked. We have the same goal, to neutralize the urns. And we each have something the other needs. You can help find the urns in this world, and I can get them back to my world. Your world? Tyler said. Hey, what's your name anyway? She bowed, then said, My name is... I know what it is, I interrupted. I figured it out. Jackson Tyler looked at me with surprise. The girl raised her eyebrows, waiting for me to reveal her name. I didn't want to say it, because the act of speaking her name would be admitting she was alive, that she was real, that the gods are real. I took a long breath, then said, Your name is Pyra. Chapter 18, Jax. We were on the move again, heading down a path toward Tyler's car. My brain was getting pretty close to overloading. Pyra? Seriously? A girl from a story? A girl who'd been given 3 urns by Zeus to make her happy, and then had those urns stolen by her father? She was here, in Boston. She'd come from the realm of the gods, and she wanted to join forces with Tyler, Ethan, and me. This would make a great movie, no doubt about it. As Pyra walked, her wet sandals left prints on the path. The hem of her tunic was soaked too. My feet were still wet inside my sneakers, and it was kind of uncomfortable, but I didn't care. I was walking next to a girl from another world. I don't mean to be rude, but can you do a trick or something just to prove you are who you say you are? Ethan asked. She rematerialized in the middle of a fountain, Tyler reminded him. She brought me a magic elixir. That's proof enough. Not really, he said. If we're going to work together, then I'd like something more. Something I can measure or record. I didn't blame him for doubting. He tried to logic everything, but sometimes you just had to go with the flow. Ethan was at her heels. She smelt like freshly peeled oranges and mint. I desperately wanted those sandals. They'd look good with my purple jacket. Are you immortal, like the gods? Immortal? She laughed. Only the gods are immortal. But if you measure my life by your calendar, I am much older than any of you. You don't look older, Tyler said. Thank you. She smiled at him. I squeezed between them. I think we'd all feel better if you explained some things. Which things? She asked. Well, basically all things, I said. We need you to explain everything. I turned around and looked at Ethan. Right? Yes, he said. Start with how you found us. She pushed her hair behind her shoulders. Lamplight caught in the sparkles, making her hair look wet. We believed that the urns were forever lost in your world, and therefore that they would not be a danger to humanity. But your great aunt dug one up and opened it. The moment the magic was released, its power was felt on Olympus, and the gods knew an urn had been found. There was no doubt that the urn needed to be returned to our realm, but there was debate about who to send and how exactly to get the urn without causing more disruption. But then your great aunt went into hiding. You couldn't find her because no more magic was being released, I guessed, so no one could sense the urn's location. Exactly, she continued. Years later, when you Jax opened the Urn of Hope in the city called Washington, D.C., the gods again felt its power. I volunteered to retrieve it since it rightfully belonged to me. So I transported to the location where the magic had been unleashed. The Thomas Jefferson Memorial? Tyler asked. Yes. Unfortunately, the urn was gone by the time I arrived. I watched as you were taken away in a medical chariot. I have been watching you ever since. But when you did not lead me to the urn, I searched your houses. I did not sense the urn's presence in either house. That's because we didn't have it, I said. You were inside our houses? Tyler asked. He scratched the back of his neck, looking a bit uncomfortable. Did you go into my room? It's not usually so messy. I wish you'd called first. I would have cleaned. Pyra smiled at him. She didn't say anything mean about how his room looked or smelled. I realized she'd been nice to all of us through this whole thing, even while we were chasing her, and even while we were doubting her, she'd been nice. I wished I could be more like that. When it became apparent that you no longer possessed the urn, I was afraid it was lost forever. So I begged the gods to allow me to break one of their rules. What rule? Ethan asked. Those of us who live in the realm of the gods are not supposed to communicate with this world. But Zeus gave me special permission to speak to you. So I followed you to the merchant's shop known as Merlin's Comics. I needed to get information from you. Information? Tyler frowned. It was official. She talked to him because she'd been trying to find out about the urn. She hadn't been into him after all. He suddenly looked like he needed another hit of magic elixir. That's why you left so suddenly? Because you'd gotten the information? Exactly. You told me where to find your great aunt, and I needed to secure transportation. She put her hand on Tyler's shoulder. But I would have liked to spend more time with you. Your gaming strategies are very interesting. Tyler didn't need a happy elixir after all. Just a few words from Pyra, and he was beaming again. Pyra's strides were long, so I had to quicken my pace. I still don't understand. You got to Sisters of Mercy before us, so how did you find Juniper? She was listed as Jane Doe. As I got close, I felt the urn's presence, she explained. It led me to your great aunt's room. Of course! I slapped my hand on my leg. That's why I didn't feel it. By the time we arrived, you'd already taken it. I climbed in through the window and introduced myself to the woman lying in the bed. She gave me the urn of her own free will. Pyra looked around. Where is your chariot? Not much farther, Tyler said, pointing down the path. This city is crowded. It was hard to find an empty spot, and that has nothing to do with my parking abilities. My head was still jammed with questions, but Ethan got the next one. Why did you help us get away from Ricardo? He asked. You had the urn. You could have left the convention center and made it back to the fountain safe and sound, but you risked helping us. Why? You needed help, she said. Besides, I realized that I needed your help too. There is a saying in my world that 4 heads are better than one. We have the same thing, I told her, only it's 2 heads are better than one. In my world, there are many multi-headed creatures, so 4 makes more sense. Cool, Tyler said. You still haven't explained where you're going or what you're doing, I said. My goal is the same as yours, to find the other 2 urns and neutralize them. The man named Ricardo is clever at hiding, and he currently possesses the urn of faith. We must find the urn of love before he does. Ricardo has faith? I said, but that means. Ricardo is the bank robber, Tyler said, completing my sentence, which totally annoyed me. He used faith to steal money. Then he followed us to Boston because he wanted to get hope. Next, he'll try to find love. Exactly, Pyra said. Wait a minute. Ethan scurried in front of us, then turned around and walked backward as he asked the following uber important question. Why can't the gods find the urns? Yes, exactly. Why were we going through all this when the gods had infinite powers to do whatever they wanted? Why didn't Zeus transport through Poseidon's portal and deal with this himself? The gods used to live in the human world, but it was a disaster. While some of the gods protected the human race, others pitted humans against one another for sport. They meddled in daily lives, destroyed without reason, pursued whatever they wanted for their own gain. It brought about a civil war, and the only way the gods could save themselves from destruction was to move away. Since that time, they have been forbidden to enter or interfere in the human world. But they gave you a vial of bubbling green stuff for Tyler, Ethan pointed out. That's interfering, isn't it? I took the vial, she said. They did not give it to me. When I saw the pain in your brother's eyes, I felt compelled to save him. She looked at him as if she were looking at a cute puppy. How could I allow such beautiful eyes to be marred by sadness? Beautiful? Tyler returned her smile. My eyes are like satyr's dung compared to your eyes. Wait a minute. Were they flirting? Ew! It's getting dark, Ethan said. We still have no place to spend the night. What are we going to tell Mom and Dad when they call? Then he bumped into something. Oh, cool. Look at this. We all stopped walking. Ethan was distracted by a historic marker of some sort, which made perfect sense because he loved that kind of stuff. The bronze plaque had a drawing of some men dressed in revolutionary clothing. Ethan began to read aloud. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth for separate and equal station, to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. I do not understand, Pyra said. What are these words? Ethan's brain went into factoid mode. That's the opening paragraph to the Declaration of Independence. It's a document that describes the reasons why this country was founded. He pointed to the words. It becomes necessary to dissolve the political bands, means that we didn't want to be ruled by England anymore. Why? She asked. Because we didn't like their laws, Tyler said. Their king was a butthead. She read the next section. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You have a right to be happy? she asked. Then she laughed. And the right to life and liberty? This is unheard of in my world. The gods take lives as they wish and grant whatever they feel like granting. You are lucky they no longer inhabit your world. I remembered some of those stories I'd read in the mythology book about how the gods got jealous and turned a beautiful woman into a hideous creature with snakes coming out of her head, and how they tricked a man into murdering his own father. I guess it was a good thing that they'd moved out of the neighborhood. A few minutes later, we reached Tyler's car. So, where are we going? He asked. Pyra set her bag inside. Then she removed the brown belt that had been wrapped around her waist. It was the same belt she'd taken to the puzzle master. I'd forgotten about the belt. When I collected the urn of hope from your great aunt's room, I found this. We all leaned close as she straightened the leather. A line of symbols had been printed from one end to the other. That's Greek, Tyler said. Yes, but the letters are jumbled. They make no sense. She ran her finger across the ink. I asked your great aunt, but she could not remember anything about the belt. Her mind was confused. I bet I know what this is, Tyler said, taking the belt in his hands. He didn't know that Pyra and the puzzle master had already discussed this. It's called a cipher. You need to wind it around a cylinder the correct size. That's called a key. Then you read the actual message. Does this have something to do with the urns? I asked. Yes, Pyra said. I have a feeling that it does. If I could respect anything, it was an instinctual feeling. Do you think Juniper has the key? I asked. We could go back to Sisters of Mercy and look through her stuff. Tyler pointed a finger in the air as if a great idea was about to sprout. What if we already have the key? Something that's small and cylindric. The urn, Ethan cried. Then his shoulders slumped. Oops, the urn is gone. No problem, Tyler said. We just have to find something that's the same size and shape. He held out his hand. It was about this big, right? The size of a cup, narrower at the base and getting wider near the top. He stuck his head into his car and rummaged around, then came back out with a huge grin on his face and a Starbucks coffee cup. We all watched as he wound the belt around the cup, then he held it out to Pyra. I can read some Greek, but you'd better do this. While Tyler slowly turned the cup, Pyra read. We listened, holding our breaths as if she were about to spill a classified government secret. The locksmith will unlock love with a kiss. The locksmith? I inhaled so quickly I started to cough. Do you know the meaning of this phrase? Pyra asked. Everyone turned to look at me. Yes, I said. Well, I don't know the whole meaning, but I know who the locksmith is. I've never met him, but... Don't say anything, Ethan cried. Then he motioned frantically. I need to talk to you two. It's private. Tyler and I joined Ethan on the sidewalk. He turned his back to Pyra, who was winding the belt around her waist again. I just want to remind you that we're supposed to be going home tomorrow. We'll tell the parental units that we want to stay at the festival longer, Tyler said. Yes, I agreed. We have to help Pyra find the Urn of Love, Ethan. She's the only one who can destroy these things. That's what Great Aunt Juniper wants. That's been her goal ever since she found the Urn of Hope. When they're gone, she won't have to hide anymore. She'll be able to live a normal life. Not to mention the rest of the world won't be in danger, Tyler said. So you guys believe this? Ethan said. That she's Pyra and the Urn of Hope is with Zeus in the realm of the gods? Yes, I said. As crazy as it sounds, yes, yes, yes. Me too, Tyler said. And when this is over, I'm going to give her part ownership in Cyclopsville. She can help us make it totally authentic. Do you think she can get me some footage of a real Cyclops? That would be awesome. I ignored Tyler and put both hands on Ethan's shoulders. I could tell by the way he was chewing on his lip he was freaking out. It's going to be okay, I told him. We had already accepted all this stuff. We knew the gods were real. We knew the urns were powerful. This is just a little bit more information. It's a lot more, he said. The gods still exist. I laughed. Yeah, pretty cool, huh? This was the kind of realization that people would write books and songs about. This was as surprising as learning that Santa Claus was real, or having a spaceship land in your backyard. I felt all bouncy inside, so I hugged Ethan real hard. I even hugged Tyler. Let's do this! Then we all got into the car. What did you decide during your council? Ira asked. Will you help me with your riddle? Do you know who the locksmith is? Yes, I said. He's my father. And that's the end of the chapter.